Every minute of every day, the SAIAshare Group is working to make products that make a world of difference to homeowners and business owners, to families and to communities. The SAIAshare Group is a multinational company with operations covering Eastern, Central and Southern Africa. The group is Africa's largest producer of steel roofing and sheeting and the first producer of aluminium zinc-coated steel on the continent. With over 36 businesses and insights gathered over 50 years, the SAIAshare Group has remained at the forefront in providing products that lead the industry. The group opened its first manufacturing facility in Mombasa, Kenya in 1962 and has grown steadily, now operating in 12 countries, using the world's leading aluminium zinc metal coating technology and state-of-the-art color coating processes to produce the coil used by its roofing operations. The outputs of more than 30 roof manufacturing operations make the SAIAshare Group the largest producer of metal roof sheeting in Africa. A full range of associated products are also available to provide a complete solution from one trusted source. The group is founded on a bold vision: to make a world of difference. The SAIAshare Group roofing operations strive to provide customers with the best metal products they can afford, suiting all applications, from residential homes to offices, commercial and industrial applications. Steel sheeting is roll-formed in factories or on-site, in various profiles and finishes, and supplied complete with accessories for a complete roofing solution. At the group's metal coating plants, steel is coated to give it a longer lifespan. The SAIAshare Group was the first producer of aluminium zinc-coated steel in Africa, the world's most advanced coating alloy to deliver an extended service life to steel. Metal-coated steel is sold under the brand name Zincal. Color-coated Zincal is sold under the brand names Color Plus, Optima and Optima Plus, in an array of popular colors that are both durable and beautiful. To complement its roofing brands, specialist products have been developed by the SAIAshare Group, such as the fixed-tight fastener products, steel pipes and hollow sections, and other value-added accessories for the building industry. The SAIAshare Group lays great store on being a socially responsible corporate citizen. Its focus is primarily on the communities in which it operates, particularly those who are most affected by poverty and social disadvantage. The group also supports innovators who serve as role models for community upliftment. Steel is uniquely placed to help communities across Africa meet the challenges of development in a sustainable, responsible manner. And at the end of its life, steel is 100% recyclable, helping minimize the impact of the built environment on our precious planet. The SAIAshare Group is committed to finding solutions today for a better tomorrow and to making a world of difference.
On behalf of SAIA Practice, welcome to all SAIA members and the friends of SAIAshare. A warm welcome to those who have joined SAIAshare for the very first time. We trust you will enjoy the afternoon with us. Do remember, the event is held on the first Friday of every month. It is event number 13, but there is nothing unfortunate about today's event. Even Eskom is cooperating with SAIAshare. My name is Eugene Barnard. I will be your host this afternoon. With us we have Corina Gibson from ECPD. Nice to have you, comforting to have you in the background again, Corina. We are also pleased to acknowledge and welcome our sponsors for the event, Christopher Knight from the SAIAshare Group. Welcome again, Christopher.
Thank you, Eugene.
For those of you who've attended SAIAshare before, you will know that we have two power-packed presentations for your edification. And may I invite you, please participate by posting questions and comments in the questions box during the event as the presentations are given, and we will try our best in the Q&A session to address all or as many of the questions as possible. In session 2, Jonathan Noble will be talking to us about his book, The Architecture of Peter Rich, Conversations with Africa. But I'll do his introduction just a little bit later. So it is my privilege to welcome and introduce you to John Dovey. John, welcome, and very nice to have you with us. Now, John and my paths first crossed way back in the 1970s when we had considerably more hair on our respective heads, and the hair was much longer as well. We were both students at the University of Port Elizabeth in the architectural department. John joined Osmond Lang Architects after graduating in 1980 and remained with the company until his retirement 40 years later. He was managing director for more than half that time, and that is quite an achievement. John worked in Gaborone, Botswana, in the Ciskei, and later in Johannesburg, and was involved in, amongst others, Melrose Arch and the OR Tambo Airport Precinct. He has seen and experienced the evolution of the architectural practice, the architectural firm, over nearly half a century. And so John is well equipped to talk to us about adapt or die. We live and work in a changing world. So thank you, John, for sharing your experience with us. We trust it will be of great help to us practitioners to navigate the future. And so over to John.
Thanks, Eugene. I trust some of this will be of modest interest. Actually, Lance Fulton, one of the attendees here, sent me a LinkedIn message saying that he was made to believe that architects work without retiring. And Lance, you're right. That's partly because of our love for architecture, but mainly because we never make enough money. So I'll be working again soon. But if money was the object, making money the prime focus, we would have become attorneys or accountants, maybe even politicians. We're, for the most part, romantics, passionate about buildings, spaces, the creation of those two in a way that improves the world, and maybe at the same time tickles our egos a little bit. And it's that passion, that commitment that makes us as architects so special. But it's also the quality that makes us a bit slow to change. This is my opinion. Sometimes a little bit too independent or detached. The reality is that we have to continuously adapt to change. Because if we don't, we become irrelevant, or even worse, we die. Osmond Lang has been around for 7 years, short of a century now. And as Eugene mentioned, I was there for about 40% of that history. But the point that I want to stress, just looking back on it, is that 40 years flew past fast, but the changes that occurred are absolutely gobsmacking, and certainly far more extreme than I'd ever contemplated or imagined, and certainly more than I ever planned for. Just swinging my mind back, in 1980, all my drawing work was on a large AO parallel rule drawing board with an adjustable triangle. Most of you never even heard of it, I'm sure. The hottest technology I had was a calculator. And apartheid with its machinations was still here. Cell phones, the internet, Google, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, those were just fantasies, wild talk. Eskom worked. Potholes were very rare. And there wasn't even a strong awareness of the fact that global warming was killing the planet, etc., etc. You get the point. Things have changed dramatically. And so when one looks back a little, it's quite scary, maybe depending how you look at it, quite exciting, just how fast changes, how fast change changes. We all know it's there, we all talk about it, but the point I want to make is that it's a heck of a lot faster than any of us actually realize, and it's relentless. If we don't innovate almost ahead of the times, we slide into that quagmire of insignificance, almost like world famous Kodak did. So where's architecture going in the post-COVID era? So hybrid working seems set to stay. Every business seems to be on its own particular path in terms of what its unique version of hybrid looks like. So we've got to get our minds around various hybrid possibilities. In an era where working remotely also seems to have become a relative norm, where many executives feel liberated to be working from Plettenberg Bay, Knysna, Hout Bay. But with that liberation, they're changing many dynamics. Many of them have sold their big city houses. They've left the cities and they've shrunk their corporate footprint. We're living in an era where drone deliveries will be the next global phenomenon in terms of courier services. Which courier company will take it up, who knows? But where's it all going to? Well, the reality is I haven't a clue. And I suspect that Prof. Jonathan, who follows me, would be in a much better position to talk to that. Maybe we can get him back at a future date to come and address that particular topic. But here are a few random observations from my history, and most of them are incredibly obvious motherhood statements. So you might find them a little boring, but they're more about human behavior and management attitudes than any high-powered artistic architectural perspective. And by the way, the slideshow that Karina is kindly rolling for me here is simply an overview of the Osman Lang practice. And it's there to illustrate some of the projects that I was involved with, but it also hopefully gives you some visual relief as I drone on. Anyway, here goes with a few observations. The one is that we can't afford to just wait for things to settle down. I've heard that phrase many times in the last 2 years, for things to get back to normal. The reality is normal will never be the same again. Nor should we waste time and energy trying to change the circumstances to suit our particular style of operation. We've got to become more and more adaptable. And everyone says they're adaptable, but I keep seeing that we're not adaptable enough, and we're also not quick enough to change. We need to be ahead of the curve a bit more. And adaptability is, after all, an attitude or an outlook. Quite often, the the threats that we fear the most are the very opportunities we're looking for. Now, most of us think of ourselves as architects as adaptable, flexible, able to think on our feet. That's how we're trained. But I've noticed that maybe not everywhere, but in many practices, as soon as things are working, as soon as projects are being successfully delivered, money is being made, systems are functioning, there's a tendency to standardize, systemize, and not bad things in their own right, but many to start stagnating, becoming too fixed in their ways. And so we don't keep ahead of that changing curve. During my early directorship, Osman Lang had 12 different offices in Southern Africa with nearly 20 different directors. And each office had its own unique flavor, dynamism, character. But the ones that were the most exciting, Eugene was involved with one of those, the ones that were fresh, innovative, and pumping out the most exciting architecture. Those, even though we were all using the same systems, but they were the offices where the really young architects were allowed to fly, where they were allowed to come in, substantially influence things, and challenge the status quo. And again, so many of us say we do that, we allow that, but I don't see it happening as often as it should. So often the senior guys think of the pie as restricted in size, and they don't want to let youngsters in to get a slice of the action before they've truly earned it, often with many years of service. So we need to get those youngsters with their inexperience, sure, but importantly, it's their liberated thinking that's the lifeblood for practices. We've got to allow them to play meaningful roles in the management, running, and the molding of our whole business culture and strategy. I'm sure many of you are doing that, but I just think we all need to do it a lot more. I was appointed as a director in Osman Lang at a pretty young age, and I felt completely out of my depth. But again, looking back, I think it's a time when I was the most able to contribute and where I grew exponentially. So let the young guns in, make them sweat. But I think we as an industry will become fresher, more innovative as a result. Changing tack a little, according to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, you've heard this a million times, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But for me, that sums up the 1 + 1 = 3 power of synergy or teamwork. Nothing is as all-conquering as a united team. And again, as I look back, Osman Lang experienced a number of minor palace revolutions over the years. And almost every time that we had one of those, it was instigated by one of the more talented, often the most talented architects in the practice. Certainly, often the most profitable of the directors. Obviously, guys felt that they needed, wanted, deserved more, and possibly they did. But within a partnership or a board of directors, the moment that pride, egotism, and greed stick up their ugly heads, the whole team loses its focus. Unity's out the window, and profitability invariably suffers. I became MD and stayed there for a reasonable time. And during most of that time, we enjoyed a relatively undisturbed period. But it's largely because the directors as a whole, not of my making, but they adopted deliberately realistic views of themselves and specifically reminded themselves, acknowledged the supportive value of the rest of the team. Everyone, every cog in the system had credible value. Now, we also changed the way in which profits were distributed. Annual salaries were determined because in our case, maybe often the case, many of the tensions arose around financial affairs. So each year, profits were split on merit. No great magic in that, probably the way all of you work. But how we worked it is that if your office had a particularly good year, you got an almost immediate reward for that success. The way the system worked, some of the newest directors in the door could quite easily, and quite a number of times did, earned a larger slice of the pie than the MD or the older directors, and that slice influenced their salaries going forward. So you could have a very junior guy being one of the highest earners in the business. The formula that we used was simple, transparent, and it involved all the individual directors, so that folks felt that their share of the business was never arbitrary, determined by seniority or a random event like a bunny out the hat. And generally, give or take, most folks felt that the rewards were fair and appropriate. Some might have felt that that was a bit too socialistic, but we called it a meritocracy, and it helped to keep us united for pretty much a quarter of a century. So however you particularly choose to achieve it, and every one of you will have your own formula, the point I'm trying to make is that it's absolutely imperative that your leadership is united, supportive, and enthusiastic about each other. The whole team's really got to be glued together with one common objective. So those are all pretty obvious motherhood statements, but it's not so easy to implement, easy to say, but not so easy to do. The point is a strong team always outshoots a lone ranger. On yet another tack, when I started practicing in 1980, our role as architects within the building industry was unquestionably as head or leader of the team. We were the best qualified to envisage not only the design, the end scheme, but the way in which everything clipped together. We were the best coordinators of everyone's inputs. And I still believe that that's true of us now. We still are invaluable in our ability to see everyone's contribution towards a successful end product. In some respects, back there, we were the distant great-grandparents of the Gothic and Renaissance master builders. Those guys had all of the skills and expertise to assemble the entire building, the aesthetics, proportions, functions, material procurement. Often the actual building they were best to advise on. They controlled the whole process. They were architects, engineers, QSs, and builders all rolled up in one. And we, to a much lesser degree, but to some degree, were still fulfilling that sort of role. But all of that's changed under our feet, certainly under my feet. For decades now, this is according to the American Academic Society, the performance of the building industry globally has been on the decline. They say that the economic, social, environmental, and technological performance of buildings is, as well as the professions who put them together, so that's all of us, we're all perceived to have failed to keep pace with what society expects. And they maintain we're far behind most parallel industries. Not too sure exactly how they get to those conclusions, but that's a perception. Part of the reason is that our modern lifestyle, coupled with the massive advances in technology, the explosion in new materials and new building systems, has made the whole design delivery challenge far more complex than it ever was. And it's so multifaceted that it's way beyond the knowledge or the skill of just one discipline, one part of the team. And so my exposure over about 20 years this was during the master planning, designing, and the delivery of, for example, the King Shark International Airport down at La Mercy, Durban, or Melrose Arch, certainly the early phases of that, as well as, interestingly, the future midfield terminal at OR Tambo. That helped me to realize that today's larger, more complex projects, the ones that we want to be involved with, demand, as never before, an incredibly integrated, transdisciplinary solutions. And quite a number of you guys have gone ahead and joined forces with some of the larger multinational, multidisciplinary engineering practices, no doubt in response to this need. And I'm sure you've already created a mechanism for working in a multidisciplinary way to tackle these bigger than normal challenges. So for all of you, well done. And what I say now probably might not apply to you. So again, apologies in advance. But for me, I have always been very resistant to the idea of joining the global players, possibly incorrectly. Being absorbed by one of the larger engineering practices was always a concern of mine, firstly because of a fear of losing independence, and then partially not wanting to become what I perceive to be swallowed up, underpaid, the aesthetic subcontractor to a largely insensitive engineering behemoth. I know that's a terribly outdated and ignorant perspective, but that was my perspective. So there you go, reluctant to change, not quick to take the initiative or lead the process. So mea culpa. But experience has highlighted my short-sightedness. In reality, working on several of those larger projects, for example, that OR Tambo midfield terminal project, that was done in collaboration with a number of local engineers, but very excitingly for me, was working along with Arab's London-based aviation, multidisciplinary aviation team. That was an absolute delight. Never once was our role or our function challenged or in any way undermined. But we were highly educated, stimulated, and enriched by working along in joint design workshops with all of these specialists inputting into the process. And guys who knew everything there is to know about tunneling under live runways, sophisticated multi-directional people mover systems, multi-terminal baggage movement systems, and then the multiple factors as well as live modeling packages that they were able to bring to the table to help make modern day airports significantly more efficient and significantly environmentally more sustainable, and so on and so on. So in that team environment, we were designing with incredible certainty because we had so much support, but it was also because we were up to speed on all of the engineering related perspectives. We were getting inside their heads, seeing things from their side. So many of you will say, well, that's the way we always work, but somehow our traditional style has been slightly more separate in my experience. As you know, design's a complex, non-linear process. So we constantly learn and enhance the end product by simultaneously tapping into every discipline, not in steps, but simultaneously. And I'd argue that bringing the contractor into the process earlier and earlier is also an essential that, again, many of you are pursuing. However, there's one major problem, I think, in the whole way we work, and that's based on our training at Varsity. Our training doesn't have to, but it tends to perpetuate in the way that we practice. So this is finally the point I'm clumsily trying to make. At most universities, and I haven't done an incredibly thorough check of curricula and so on, so Prof. Jonathan will probably club me and discipline me afterwards. But at most varsities, it strikes me we're well educated about the role, the function, the inputs of engineers, the QSs, the contractors. We might even attend lectures together, but we spend little time in the design studios actually working jointly as a multidisciplinary team, taking the architecture, engineering, and the costs to completion. Design projects tend to be done in relative isolation or in a somewhat detached manner. So at varsity, we might work together as teams on a particular scheme, a bit like a real office, but it's seldom, in my experience or my knowledge, and again, I stand to be corrected, where the entire team continuously takes every project through to its conclusion. And I understand that it allows the universities to evaluate and mark individual students. I can imagine in a fully integrated team process, it would be very difficult to monitor and assess the progress of one individual student. But the problem with designing in relative isolation is it perpetuates that separate, siloed learning experience. And we only start getting into the minds of the other consultants much later on in our careers. And I think we lose quite a lot of ground, quite a lot of creative possibilities in the process. Worst of all, it could become the model, the only model we use in practice. Some academics, interdisciplinary collaboration right from first year can begin to break down the silos in design education. But I think we've got to go beyond the scenario where we have the engineer arriving, sitting at the table, tabling his experience, sharing it with us, but with an invisible dotted line around his discipline. So he's the only one who gets to comment on structures or civils and so on. Again, I know we as architects have lots to say and to influence, but I just think that the blurring of the lines between us doesn't occur enough. Some academics have moved the goalposts even further, saying that we need more than interdisciplinary collaboration. We need to achieve a sort of transdisciplinary hybrid where every discipline knows enough about each other's area of expertise so that the boundaries become deliberately blurred, and we can all start adding value to each other's area of expertise and responsibility, not as the project reaches finality, but right from the creative embryonic stages. Obviously, great debate, lots of logistical problems, and this would have big impacts on the way university training occurs. So there are countless issues to be resolved, but I think, again, we need to be proactively changing ahead of the curve. It would also have an impact ultimately on our appointments, the way our consultant agreements are put together. We started trying to create hybrid agreements in the early days of Melrose Arch, but those were very early nursery steps, far from successfully achieving the objective. But folks, there are lots of other probably more stimulating lessons and messages that we can extract from a career in the business of architecture, like the need for us to have a uniform profession-wide stance on fee discounting. That I'm sure is something you guys discuss in other fora, but I suspect that you prefer to talk about the art in architecture. So I'm going to hang up my boots there. In summary, I guess what I've just been trying to say is that, firstly, change is faster and more aggressive than I ever allowed for. I knew it was occurring, but I had no idea how fast. So much greater adaptability is essential, I believe. Secondly, to facilitate our adaptability, bring in the young guns, get them through the system and into the upper management much, much faster than we're comfortable maybe to do. Thirdly, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. A united team will always beat the Lone Ranger. So make sure that your partnership agreements are fair, inspiring, and uniting. And then lastly, it's maybe time to really revolutionize the way we train our architects at Varsity. And by extension, the way we as transdisciplinary teams tackle our projects into the future. Thanks for your time.
There we are, John. That was most informative, if not entertaining. Thank you very, very much. I remember you back from varsity days, and I could not have anticipated at that stage that you'd be able to, or that you would end up giving this very eloquent advice to the to practitioners. John, just if I may, just ask you one quick question. We are short of time, but a comment from your side. You know, there's always that tension in a practice, how focused you must be on keeping your eye on the ball, meaning the projects that you're involved in, and to look forward into the proverbial crystal ball, trying to navigate the practice strategically to keep pace with change. How did you manage that, and what would your advice specifically be around that operational versus strategic thinking?
Eugene, it's a good question, and I don't think we ever mastered it fully. I do think that you've got to actually specifically and strategically set aside that deep think time. So that not only travel, we've been restricted on our travel and our exposure to broader environments. I think travel is critical. I also just think the opportunity for the entire director or senior management of the practice to spend time in the bush, Bosberaad, not just talking about the profitability and the numbers, but having a good dop and actually brainstorming the future. It's amazing how creative we are, but if we sort of shackled by just talking about the problems and the systems and the money, we tend to get narrowed down. We become accountants and practitioners. Whereas when we let ourselves go, it's amazing how creative we can be. So I think it's actually in a disciplined way creating time to actually expand your own horizons, look at ways in which you can become truly different.
Correct.
Again, I think the guys will have countless good suggestions on that.
Okay, John, thank you very much once again. Please stay online. I'm going to just give our sponsors an introduction, and then we're going to launch into the second session. But on behalf, once again, of our attendees, thank you for that. Then it's my privilege to introduce Jonathan, no, not Jonathan, Christopher Knight. Christopher from SAIAshare. Thank you once again, Christopher, for sponsoring this event as you did last week, and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Eugene. I really appreciate it. And once again, we do appreciate the opportunity to actually sponsor your events. We find them highly relevant in terms of the industry and is teaching the newcomers as well as the old dogs what we can change going forward. John has mentioned Adapt or Die. And I think SAIAshare Steel is a company that has been around now for actually 12 years this year. And we formed part of the SAIAshare group that started its manufacturing facility in Mombasa in Kenya in 1962. So we've got quite a prestige history behind us. And in terms of the technology that we utilize, it is a technology that we hold the license to actually produce with. Now, pointer. So we produce under license to the IEC, the aluminium zinc compound. In terms of alloys, and we are only the foil coating manufacturer. We don't actually roll form our material. It is supplied into the market into all the roll formats. So this just depicts a quick process of how we actually apply our aluminium zinc in our factory in Cato Ridge in KZN. So we are a local manufacturer of this world-class coated steel, and we do have other factories, like I mentioned, in Kenya and Mombasa, and as well as in Tanzania. So our operations here are called SAIAshare Steel, and we basically get in our cold rolled coil that is coated in aluminium zinc, being 43.5% zinc, 55% aluminium, and 1.5% silicon alloy. So this technology does extend the actual life expectancy of your base metal compared to the likes of your galvanized material. So in this, it just shows you the cross section of what we actually do. On the left, then your galvanized material, which is basically your zinc, 99%, and then on the right-hand side, having the attributes of your zinc and aluminium, and your zinc being your sacrificial protection and aluminium being your barrier protection in terms of your coated lifespan. So in essence, in theoretical terms, your zinc coating will allow for double the service life of your base metal, whereas with an aluminium zinc coating, it should allow for up to 4 times longer than your zinc coated material. In this image, it just shows you the comparative performance in the same test environment of the equivalent coated mass of an AZ150 compared to a Z275 galvanized material. And as you can see, the performance ratios are superior to AZ technology. Then if we have a look at the metallic finishes being your AZ, they are a highly reflective alloy. The AZ coated steel retains its reflectivity for longer than galvanized coated steel, creating a cooler roof with your aluminium compound and your alloys. And in terms of your AZ, it maintains its aesthetic appeal and heat reflectiveness through the life cycle of the product. And another benefit is that your heat transformation into your building is less than that of a galv or clay roof. Then we move on to other brand name in terms of color-coated material. Color Plus is applied on your rollers through obviously a controlled environment through your furnaces, and then with your end product being your flat coil. I like to show that video because we do get questions such as, are your materials powder coated? No, in fact, they're not. They are an organic paint system. And then in terms of the actual layers of the paint system itself, it's very important to note that yes, you've got your steel core being your cold rolled coil. Then you've got your alloys added onto it, which would be your aluminium zinc compound or zinc, but obviously preferably AZ. Then you've got your pre-treatment and your innovative primer that actually adds to your corrosion protection compared to just the standard zinc material. And your top coat is basically your aesthetical coat that assists against your UV and mechanical protection. And these systems are tested in the South African environment. So we have very harsh dry areas as well as humid environments within Southern Africa, and we do have test stations throughout Southern Africa to ensure that our paint systems are built to withstand the elements out there. These are just the different finishes that we offer. We have our standard Color Plus, which is our gloss paint system. We have Color Plus Textured, Color Plus Matte, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see a metallic paint system that we actually created for a project in Cape Town. It just shows that we can go outside of the basket of our standard color palette that we show here. So that was quite a bespoke project in Cape Town. It's actually the DSP next to the airport in Cape Town. And it just shows we can go outside of the standard color palette. And then these are just the examples of our systems itself. So Zinkel on a residential property, our Rain Cloud Matte, the project in Cape Town. You'll see that the glare factor is obviously reduced. And then this is our Thunderstorm Textured in a residential application. We do obviously have in retail sector as well. And this just shows the adaptability in terms of what we're saying, either adapt or die. We need to change in accordance to what the design criteria are. We want to ensure that the architects have a material that they can create a bespoke look and project with. This just depicts the what we just went through recently. I'll show you now what we're going for. This is a project in Gauteng. It's the Pick and Pay Distribution Center. And in that, we'd like to congratulate one of our partners and customers, should I say, that it was confirmed that on the 25th of May 2022, Max Steel Service Center broke the Guinness World Records title for the longest roof span covered by a single metal corrugated sheet at 280 meters long. So they utilized this through their Novatexi product through a sky forming technology. And I'll just show you a quick video if it won't have sound. And we as Safel Steel are proud to note that we were the supplier of the material for this particular project. And then just another aspect is that we are 100% local. That means that we do form part of the designation that your local content requirements for your government parastatal projects, we do form part of that supply. And that was issued in 2017. But thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Christopher. That was very interesting. 280 meters, a single sheet. That's massive.
I must be honest, Eugene, it was quite something to be on site to see it, and the building itself is phenomenal. It's a huge project. It's exceeding the boundaries of the old design of a square box.
Right, colleagues, now it's my great privilege to introduce our second presenter to you, Jonathan Noble. I hope that many of your students are in attendance, Jonathan. But nevertheless, Jonathan is the academic head of architecture at the University of Free State. He lectures in creative research, architectural design, and he convenes the PhD in architecture program specialization in design. Professor Noble holds a 5-year B.Arch professional degree and an M.Arch by independent research degree, both from WITS, and then a PhD from the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College London. Jonathan has authored numerous books, one of them, African Identity in Post-Apartheid Public Architecture. He's also authored the book White Skin, Black Masks, published by Ashgate. And then most recently, one of the reasons for John's appearance on SAIAshare this afternoon is the book which he completed in 2020, the book, The Architecture of Peter Rich, Conversations with Africa. And it's published by Lund Humphreys. Jonathan, congratulations with the latest book. It was published in a difficult year and will probably stand out as a book that appeared during COVID. We are really privileged to have you with us this afternoon, and we look forward to hearing all about Peter Rich, about the book, and about the process of writing it. So the screen is yours.
Thank you, Eugene. It's truly a tremendous pleasure to share with you this afternoon concerning my new book on the architecture of Peter Rich, which was published by Lund Humphreys in the UK in October 2020. The book has 184 pages, 20 color plates, and some 100 black and white illustrations. And here it is. And I must say, it's a beautiful book. And it's really a tremendous joy to have your work published as a book. And in this case, it's with a really good mainstream arts and design publishing house. This book follows on from my previous book titled African Identity in Post-Apartheid Public Architecture, White Skin, Black Masks, which was published by Ashgate, UK in 2011, and it's shown here to the right as a small picture. And this, my former book, developed from my PhD, which looked at the search for a new identity in public buildings of the early post-apartheid era, looking at pre-colonial heritage, but also trying to understand the unique qualities of our African modernity or post-modernity. With my new book, I wanted to continue with some of these themes, now in the form of an architectural monograph aimed at a wider audience. The second part of the title is important: Conversations with Africa, because the book is all about art, architecture, and all those human questions of identity and belonging, which are just never clear-cut. So conversations are required. We need to listen, to observe, converse, and learn. So why Peter? Well, I think it's true to say he's one of a kind. He's original, he's incredibly quirky, and he's unique. His work stands out. It's local, but has won international acclaim, and that matters. Mainstream publishers just won't consider an architectural monograph unless the work is of an international standing, and Peter really ticks that box. Peter is seen here in the landscape at Mapungubwe, with the building he is arguably best known for in the background, about which I wrote, quote, "Rich is caught in motion, looking forward, a restless soul, a traveler, always moving on." This book is the result of some 5 years of writing and research. A key aspect of my method involved conversations with Peter, and I recorded and had transcribed no less than 20 hours of interviews with Peter, and a further 20 with others who involved with his projects. and from which I quote extensively in the narrative. When I do these interviews, I always prepare carefully considered questions. But in session, things tend to go free range, and I enjoy the improvisational aspect of this, which stimulates thought and discovery. I also had the pleasure of working with a professional photographer, Barry Goldman, whom I accompanied on photographic excursions across South Africa. It was important to work closely with Barry to achieve the exact right shot, ones that might enrich the narrative. And nearly all the color photographs are entirely original, selected for the book. You can see us three here, the Three Stooges, on our way back from a wonderful mad weekend in the bush. And we just had to stop for this one, taken below this equally mad Tropic of Capricorn road sign. Oh gosh, I don't like talking on these Zoom sessions because I was hoping someone would laugh, and it's very quiet here. Anyway, I hope you find the slide amusing. My research required an extensive study of Peter's digital archive, collating drawings, models, and historic photographs. In some cases, drawings were inadequately scanned and were damaged and had to be redrawn. And Peter kindly agreed to make entirely new drawings to aid the narrative, like this one at his house in Westridge. It was essential to visit the buildings, to linger and breathe in the atmosphere, to find those special places and moments that might bring life to the narrative. Drawing is very important for Peter, and it has occurred to me that he draws in at least three distinct ways. He draws descriptively, as indicated here, this being the circular palace, an Ndebele settlement he measured. Indeed, for some 10 years, from 1977 onward, Peter measured and drew numerous Ndebele settlements, importantly before they were forcibly removed and demolished. And this documentation provided the basis for his research masters on the architecture of the Ndebele, awarded in 1991. But Peter also draws in a more poetic way. He travels with a sketchbook and a black lamy pen, and he literally has thousands of architectural travel sketches that deserve a book all of their own. This poetic mode attempts to capture an urban scene, an ambience, or a sense of light, as here inside a Gampur temple in India. And you can just feel the spiritual ambiance in this beautiful and mysterious drawing. And finally, Peter also makes what I like to call analogical drawings that link between realms, combining desires with imaginations, with objects and persons, and of course, architecture. This, a recent drawing of 2021, shows the rear garden at his house in Westridge, with fish from Jackson Hlongwane, whose New Jerusalem Acropolis site inspired the landscape for the garden, and body parts that morph into sculptures and then morph into architecture. Noting Peter's nose and eye on the left, and that of his wife Di on the right. And I think these drawings provide clues as to how Peter imagines and creates architecture. I now wish to speak to four themes that are developed by the book, namely vernacular translations, the implied diagonal and the realm plan, social projects, in particular Mandela's Yard, and organicism. Peter's documentation of Ndebele architecture and his related master's study established his leading ideas about architecture, space, and society. Others have studied Ndebele wall art, the beadwork, their rituals and customs. But what Peter did was to show how all of this integrates into a coherent spatial order, one that is staged by architecture. We can't go deeply into this now, but just look at this beautiful beaded apron. Consider the sophistication of the geometry that plays here. Up and down, left and right, center and periphery, duality, symmetry, and diagonal tension. And the iconography, where buildings and humans are interchangeable, and with the artful ambiguities of elevation and plan. Now placing this in a direct relation to an Ndebele homestead, I think as architects, we immediately see what Peter was trying to understand. This geometric intrigue had a profound influence upon the renovation plan of his Westridge family home. Noting here the careful gradients of indoor and outdoor spaces, and the play of duality, symmetry, and diagonal tension. A further leading influence for the house is derived from Adolf Loos's concept of realm plan. Now, Le Corbusier's free plan was about an uninterrupted flow of space, whereas Loos's realm plan worked with a more conventional box of rooms, only opened to allow for a dramatic flow across and between individual spaces. Loos spoke of the imperceptible transition between spaces. And at Westridge, Peter literally combines Ndebele geometric order with the realm plan spatial flow to achieve a remarkable African modern hybrid. Peter's house at Westridge really opened the door to the architectural themes that he subsequently would explore. And from 1986 to 1993, he designed a series of mostly residential projects that worked with permutations of the implied diagonal and the realm plan. I made this drawing to try to understand the trajectory of this body of work, which moves from a pure statement of the object and its order onto an ever increasingly subtle and organic exploration of symmetry and order. With Elam at the top left, where we clearly see the ordered object, through to the Menor Pavilion at the bottom right, where spatialized objects are held within an implied play of symmetry and order. In my narrative, I make a comparison between the geometric partie of the Kemp house, shown above, with two squares, an interior and a courtyard, versus House Kennedy, shown below, where two squares are shifted and overlap to define a dramatic moment at the center. Here, the inner courtyard at House Kemp, with diagonal tensions that push out on either side, with this being the adjacent double volume interior space. And this, the interior of House Kennedy, where dramatic vistas crisscross towards the sea and landscape at either side. Now a view from the center along the leftmost diagonal which looks down over a ravine onto the sea in the far distance. These sketches show Peter's idea for a series of descending planes that define spaces within spaces, an idea derived from the realm plan, establishing views out across the ocean and horizon beyond. A subsequent body of work concerns various social projects, the most important of which is the Alexandra Heritage Center, which took an astonishing 16 years to complete and arguably is not entirely yet complete, and which Peter describes as his monumental effort. So here we are in Alexandra Township, which is a really tough and challenging context, one that Peter wanted to appreciate and to understand. And so he listens to the textures and the informal character of the town, and he looks for architectural potential within what one might merely dismiss as squalor. This project came about because Mandela lived for a short while in Alex in 1940. His room is marked with a dot. Peter was involved with the early heritage assessment document. He measured and documented the entire area, every single dwelling, the cars and the furniture, to capture the urban life, as we can see here. And he went in alone with only a 5-meter tape, with local children helping him to measure. And he got invited in for tea, so he got to know the community. It was a full immersion. Here we see the street blocks on the outside, with a more intricate pattern of courtyards and interconnecting paths on the inside. Peter tells that this gave him the concept for his design, which takes a path that connects between two courts, inverts it to form a solid building, then audaciously floats it above the street to form a dramatic portal and to preserve as far as possible the fine grain of the urban ground. Seen from one of the yards, the architecture clearly resonates with the tough urbanity, whilst providing a triumphant symbol of hope. And I believe this duality is crucial to the success of this design, with its audacious flyover bridge that elevates the uniform and depressing qualities of the town, yet with a careful consideration of the ground plane, with raised public spaces, providing opportunities to sit and play, feeding back into the public life of Alex. Now to consider Peter's more recent move towards organicism. And it must start in the stone terraced walls that build the landscaping at his home at Westridge. But this new architectural manner rarely comes to fullness at the Mapungubwe Interpretation Center, photographed here in the raw and mythical landscape that surrounds, with Peter just visible to the right of the frame, and which gives you a sense of scale. This project is based upon the centenary timbral vault, an ancient structural concept. These unbelievable vaults at Mapungubwe are constructed from some 6 to 7 hand-pressed soil tiles with a structural depth of only 300 millimeters. And it is a world first achievement, because such low-grade tiles have never been utilized in this way before. Astonishingly, the structure is self-supporting, without any need of reinforcing or formwork. What appears to be timber formwork in this picture is merely used to establish the geometry, with the tiles being laid a few millimeters above the timber work. Those timbers might as well be cardboard or polystyrene. This, the sequence of the plan, which involves a zigzagging processional route that climbs the contours of the site from outside through the architecture and back to the landscape again. And these magnificent drawings for the Kanidud Cultural and Education Center, but which unfortunately was never built. Onto Wushan, near the Anji Mountains in China. This, the waterfall, a landscaped intervention that transitions with the lake, with retreat accommodation and various amenities. And here, one of the residential units that has been completed at the waterfall. And lastly, this is Peter's 2018 design for the Venice Biennale, which he calls his Temple of Light, and which I used to close my narrative, because here the early geometric and the later organic character of his work combine and unexpectedly synthesize. Thank you.
Jonathan, pardon me. Thank you very, very much. What a wonderful, inspirational presentation that was. And I was just so hoping that you just carry on and carry on, but all good things come to an end. And I just, we unfortunately won't be able to have a Q&A session, but just some observations and just some off-the-cuff thoughts. How wonderful it is to see so much expression once again presented in hand-crafted drawings. There's just no replacement for drawing the feeling, the emotion that comes through in a drawing when it's hand drawn. Thank you for showing those lovely sketches. The images are wonderful, and I would assume that those are images that are taken from your book. But I can only imagine what the quality of the book will be like if those pictures are anything to go by. And yes, that Tropic of Capricorn signboard, there were laughs. You couldn't hear them, and it's a pity that such a insignificant or such a sort of just a bland sign celebrates a line, a visual line across the N1 traveling north. And I've often traveled across that line, and so hope that there would be something greater to celebrate that moment. I can carry on, Jonathan. That was truly thoroughly enjoyable. And we also have a comment here that comes through from Johannes. Let me just get this comment here quickly. Donna Palan says, thank you, ... Jonathan van Vieren says, I also did not want the prof to stop speaking. Fascinating. And I speak on behalf, I'm sure, of everyone to say thank you very much. Colleagues, that brings us to the end. Please don't sign off just yet. Just stay with us just for another few minutes. I want to thank once again on your behalf, both John Dovey and Jonathan for two wonderful presentations. A lot of thought and effort went into the preparation, and we are truly privileged to have both of you with us this afternoon. Jonathan's book, unfortunately, is not yet available in South African bookshops. Corina will circulate a link if you are interested in purchasing the book from the UK. And Jonathan, if I understood you correctly, you are looking for an opportunity to launch the book in South Africa, hopefully soon. And keep an eye open for the book. I'm sure it will become available on our local bookshelves very soon. I'd also like to just thank again Christopher and the SAIAshare Group for their kind sponsorship and for supporting architecture and the profession in South Africa. Then Corina, once again, thank you to you. Can I just mention that SAIAshare has an online workshop on the 21st of June for those of you interested in attending. Then that brings me to the point where I want to thank all of you for attending. Let's just have a look, Corina, I can't see. We were, I think, peaked at 323 approximately attendees this afternoon. And we are flattered by your attendance, because it's your attendance that makes presenting SAIAshare every month worth the while. Remember, it carries a 0.01 category 1 value, and you will soon receive an email from SAIA to claim your certificates. Then, as far as next month is concerned, please save the date, the 1st of July. we have two very prominent and worthy presenters presenting. Henk Burgertman. I'm sure you will know Henk. He needs very little introduction. He will be talking to us on Menlyn Main development, one of the largest commercial developments in South Africa, if not the largest, in Pretoria. And also he will be covering his own migration from being an architect to being a developer. And I think that's something that many of us aspire to. So please join us to hear what Henk has got to say. And then our second presenter also needs no introduction, Phil Mashabane. He's in fact one of the members of the practice committee. He will be addressing us, and we look very forward to the July, in fact it's the 1st of July presentation. So colleagues, I'm going to leave you just with a slide. It's tough times and we're all experiencing stormy clouds. And they've been around for some time, but this is a delightful sketch from Charlie Mackey's book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. This storm will pass. And if there's one thing I think that we can all testify to, John in his first presentation alluded to that as well. The storms don't last forever. So please don't give up hope. The profession and the industry will recover. So colleagues, thank you once again, and please join us on Friday, the 1st of July, for SAIAshare number 14. We wish you well.